पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet Sarvastaratu Durgani Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Are all religions the same? As we encounter more and more diversity in the world in which we live, in every aspect of life, so when we encounter religion, this is one of the questions that can come. A few years ago, the United Nations resolved to celebrate the first week of February every year as the World Interfaith Harmony Week. And Harvard held its first celebration in the week of February 2011, and I got a chance to participate in many of the events which were held to promote interfaith harmony. Now, they did it for one more year in 2012, and that was about it, because afterwards other interests took over, and as it so often happens with all these declarations made by world bodies such as UN, you have an International Year of the Woman, of the Youth, and of the Children. After 2 or 3 years, the enthusiasm kind of wanes and people move on to other things. One of the earliest interfaith gatherings to occur in the contemporary history was in 1893, at which Swami Vivekananda participated in Chicago. A centenary of that event was held in 1993. They created a new body called the Council for the World's Parliament of Religions. And since 1993, every 4 years, they have been holding these huge gatherings in different cities the world over. I think in 2015, it was held in Salt Lake City. And in November, it will be held in Toronto this year. So the awareness of religious diversity has increased, and the importance of religious dialogue and understanding is increasingly being recognized the world over. Now, dealing with diversity elicits different kinds of reactions. Some people celebrate it, some people feel threatened by it, and to some others it all just seems very pointless. We find sometimes people saying glibly things such as, "Well, what's all the fight about? All religions are really the same." Now, if that were true, and if that were so obvious, then really we have to say, what is really all the fight about? What are all the disagreements about? Why is there so much cry for harmony if everyone is really already on the same page? And so these are the kind of questions that can come to our mind. Is diversity real? Are religions of the world really different? Or are they really the same? Now, that sounds like a debate. And so that's the reason for reflection this morning. A few ideas concerning diversity of religions. Now, it is simplistic to say that all the religions of the world are all the same. Clearly, they are not same. But it is also simplistic to say that the religions of the world are so different that they share nothing at all in common. And that is not true either. Religions do share a lot in common, but opinions can vary about what are the things that they share in common and where it is that they differ. Now, to me, it seems reasonable to affirm that every religion has something unique to offer to the religious consciousness of the world. if they didn't have something unique to offer, they wouldn't have survived. When we speak about survival of the fittest in evolutionary theory, but that's true with everything in the world. So if anything is surviving to this day, whether it's religion or any philosophy or whatever, it has something to contribute. The moment anything becomes completely useless, it will die out. So that's one thing that seems obvious to me, that every religion has something unique, something special to offer to the collective religious consciousness of the world. Because if it didn't, not only, as I said, it would not survive for long, but it would not even be then a religion in the truest sense of the term. It's sometimes helpful to recognize that religions can be seen to have at least primarily two aspects. There is the social aspect of religion, which is often based on culture, on language, and the symbols and the images that emerge from that. And the second aspect of religion is the experiential aspect, which is based on the direct experience of what lies beyond the senses. Now, this has given rise to the idea that the religions of the world are different in their social aspect, but the same essentially in their experiential aspect. Now, this idea is welcomed by many, but it also raises several questions. First of all, who gets to decide what is the essential part of a religion? And since social aspects of religions are different, should we assume that all the experiential aspects are identical? I mean, is there any evidence for that? Did the enlightened ones of the different religions experience the same thing? Now, these are the kind of questions that can come. Not to trivialize the issue, but one way of thinking about that would be, for instance, if someone were to say, all phones are the same, for instance. Now, would that be a right statement or a wrong statement? Now, clearly, it's simplistic to say that all are same. Clearly, they are different, they cost different, they look, well, many of them look more or less the same now, but still, they're not really the same. But can we say that they are so different from one another that they don't share anything at all in common? So as long as we continue calling them, each of them a phone, then it would seem that the most essential thing for a phone is the ability to call somebody or to receive somebody's call. And that pretty much all phones do, including a flip phone. So in their essential aspects, all phones are really the same. But of course, there are the other aspects. Some phones might be able to take better pictures. Some phones might be able to store more data and more apps and so on. So the religious issue is a little bit like that. When we say whether all religions are same or they're different. So the important thing is where they differ. Does it really matter where they differ? And where they are identical, are they not doing their primary function? Is the primary think about it this way really, although it's not really a part of what we're discussing. Those of us who have a smartphone, lot of times now, people do a lot of things other than what a phone is supposed to do. The phone now substitutes for a camera, it substitutes like a small little computer, which really it is. And what if we don't use the phone, pretty much hardly call anybody or receive any call, but we just use it because it's got a great camera or it is able to do these things. Just as that is possible, and I know a few people who do, who use phones mainly for the other benefits it has. Same thing can happen with religion too. That what is it that attracts me to a religion? Is it what the essential aspect of religion is, or all these other ancillary benefits that can come by being part of a religious tradition. But again, as I said, there are still debates about, in the phone, I think probably most of us might agree that the primary function of the phone is to call people or to receive calls, but some people might even debate that. In any case, as I said, this is just a very rough analogy about the two issues. The primary problem, as it seems to me, is the problem of words, because none of these questions that I raised earlier are easy to answer, because there is no universally accepted definition of the word religion. And what to speak of words and phrases such as God or the goal of life, enlightenment. I mean, we use these words, but there is no universal agreement about what these words really mean. The word God rings different bells in different minds. So we hear the same word, but we don't necessarily register the same meaning inside our heads. So let's look at religion. What makes anything a religion? Does something become a religion just because people identify it as religion? Now, is religion primarily a social phenomenon, or is it primarily a religious quest or a spiritual quest? Now, religion to many is inseparable from their social lives and relationships. And for others, it is primarily concerned with their relationship with God and only secondarily with the world. Now, that brings us to the definition of God. That's another loaded word in the field of religion. Two people may talk of God, but each of them may be thinking, picturing, conceptualizing a being who may be very different from what someone else is conceptualizing. Some years ago, at MIT, there's a religious life center, and we have a notice board where the different chaplaincies, they have posters announcing the programs that they have. And everyone is free. All the chaplains are free to put whatever poster they want. So here was this one poster put at least I think I imagine probably 12 or 13 years ago. And that poster was a fairly large poster. It had 4 circles and with line drawings. So each circle had a human figure, and then there was an arrow coming from above. So and then under each circle was the name of a religion and a one-line definition of that religion. So the first circle was Hinduism. There was this figure of a human being and several arrows pointing downward. So the arrows stood for the Godhead. And the explanation was Hinduism, Hindus worship many gods. The second circle was for Islam. This is one human figure, one arrow coming down, and Islam, and definition was Muslims worship one God. A third was Buddhism, and of course there was this human figure, and this one, it all was crossed out and said Buddhists worship no God. And because this poster was put by one evangelical group on the campus, the fourth circle was a larger circle. There's again this human figure and a big golden arrow coming down, which said, but Christians worship a God who is loving, who is kind, who answers your prayers, and it was a kind of a big paragraph underneath that. And so I saw that poster, and you can imagine what I thought of it. But I didn't react. I thought, let me just wait and see what others think about it. And again, as many of you can imagine, there was no reaction because very few people go to the Religious Life Center anyway, especially in a place like MIT. And so after a month or two, when we had our monthly chaplains meeting, so I thought that might be a good time to raise this question. And I said that poster has been up on the board, the notice board, for a couple of months. And I said, I'm not able to recognize myself in that poster. And I said that while everyone should be free to define their own tradition in their own way, we have to be really very careful when we take it upon ourselves to define someone else, to make sure that we are not distorting someone else's tradition. And just so I actually didn't even know who exactly had put up that poster. And the chaplain sitting next to me was the one who had put it up. And he was very kind, and I don't think he realized how offensive it could have been to other people. So he was pretty innocent about it. And so immediately when he saw that it was not going down well, so he apologized, and the poster was removed. I mentioned all this story only to show that the word God is a very loaded word. And if we look at other traditions from our own lenses, then we may not get an accurate picture. And so that was one of the interesting things that happened. And so when we look at these different words in different traditions, we think about, the word God is an English language. And when we hear about God or Allah, or in Sanskrit, we say Ishvara. In the closing prayer that we do, the Great Spirit, and many of the Native Americans call it, or even emptiness, as the Buddhists say, we wonder whether these names are different. Theologically, the descriptions seem different. So are they really pointing to the same truth or being, but conceived in a different way? Because they are being the same truth viewed through the lenses of different minds, through different cultural backgrounds, cultural imageries. Because we grow up with the symbols and images in our mind, which are influenced by the culture and language that we grow up with. And so is it possible to say that they are all different readings of the same being, the same truth? Now, because the lenses are different, the answers to the questions we raised earlier will be different as well. So is the ultimate being, the supreme being, again, the problem with the word God. So sometimes people then want to avoid the word God and use a different phrase. So think about the ultimate truth, the ultimate being. Now, does that ultimate being have a form? Is that ultimate being formless? Or is that ultimate being even beyond the idea of form and formlessness? Does that ultimate being have qualities? Is that ultimate being kind, loving, just? Or is that ultimate beyond even the notion of qualities? How transcendent has anyone or anything to be? If we think of the being as fully transcendent, then they have to transcend everything, the form, qualities. They have to transcend even our ability to conceive, to think of them. Now, never mind all these answers, but these different answers that people might get, or different names that they may give, or different descriptions that we may have, but does it necessarily make that ultimate truth different? If it is claimed that these ultimate truths are different, then none of them would be really ultimate, because one ultimate will be limited by the other. Because oftentimes we think about the divine as all-pervading. Now, we cannot have too many different divines. Everyone is all-pervading. And the simpler formulation, which seemed current for a long time, and in some minds is current even today, a simpler way would be to say, no, only my ultimate is the real one. All the other ultimates are fakes. Or there may be another way of saying whether it's the same ultimate being seen through different lenses. The same thing we can do with regard to the goal of life as well. Do all religions point to the same goal or different goals? One of the professors in BU, I think, some years ago, wrote a book, because the popular analogy is that all the different roads going to the top of the mountain. And so one of the books that one of the academic depend on academics to throw up questions we never had in our minds before. Suggested that, well, it probably could be many different mountains everyone is climbing. So to forget about kind of finding unity, you're kind of increasing the diversity that exists. So do all the religions point to the same goal? Now, there is no way to affirm that for the Christian salvation or the Buddhist nirvana or the Vedantic moksha, they are one and the same. Because not only the words different, but the way these goals are described are different as well. But again, if we dig deeper, if we kind of cut through all the dense forest of words, sometimes the words can hide the truth behind it, behind all these conceptual frameworks. And if we ask a simple question, whether we call it salvation or nirvana or moksha, don't all these words point to an experience which leaves behind the human experience of mortality, imperfection, bondage, ignorance? And I think there most of us will tend to agree that if we see that no matter how we describe it, no matter what we call it, there it seems that they do share in common, that the ultimate is thought of as a state where the human mortality, imperfections are all left behind. Now, freed from these theological trappings, it does seem that all these different words, salvation, moksha, nirvana, and so on, they all point to the experience of something that every one of us seeks. So it would seem that where we differ is how that quest can be fulfilled, not in what that price of that quest is. Language and concepts become a barrier in communication. And ironically, they are the only instruments we have to communicate. So can we use language to overcome the barrier of language? Can we use concepts to overcome or to go beyond concepts towards a reality which is being conceptualized? So we need concepts to access the reality, but we also need a way to go beyond concepts. It is not easy. It needs patience, it needs perseverance, and most importantly, it needs clarity of vision and purpose. As modes of communication and carriers of ideas, language is very important. There is a book called Viveka Chudamani, and Shankaracharya, there is a Sanskrit phrase he uses. He says, Shabdajalam Maharanyam Chitta Brahmana Karanam, meaning the web of words is like a dense forest that causes the mind to wander. And that's the main problem. When we get caught in words or in the concepts that they convey and lose sight of the reality that they point to, we are in trouble. And that's very important in religious diversity. When we read, it's great. Nowadays we have access to many different books, many different resources, and which is wonderful. But what can create confusion sometimes is when we access information from different traditions, we find sometimes similar words being used, words such as soul, consciousness, God, and so on. Now, just because you find the same words across traditions to automatically translate in our mind that all these words mean exactly how I understand them, that creates confusion. So it's better to, no matter what word is used, to see in what sense it is being used. So then the words will not misguide us. So once we are able to go beyond these words, beyond the concepts, and then we look at the spirit, the inner soul that animates and powers every religious tradition, and we can do that very carefully, very respectfully, without diminishing the sanctity, the beauty, and importance of diversity. So it's not to just make everyone same, to recognize diversity, but to look deeper and find that wonderful as this diversity is, what makes it wonderful is this underlying unity that is at the foundation of the diversities that we find in life. Now, look at the practices of different religions as well. While the practices are obviously different, is it impossible to find something that is common in all of them? Now, most religious traditions practice prayer, some kind of prayer, worship, contemplation, selfless service. Now, the details regarding these, when a prayer has to be done, how it is to be done, those will be different. And why it should be done will be answered through the theological framework of every tradition. But the essence of the practice, in my opinion, is shared across religious boundaries. Now, those who are engaged in prayer and other spiritual practices, irrespective of their religious affiliation, are trying to transcend their human limitations by employing the means provided by their respective traditions. It is possible to associate all these religious practices with the different faculties of the human mind, and that is what Swami Vivekananda did. One way to distinguish practices just by religion. Oh, these are Vedantic practice, these are Christian practice, these are Buddhist practice, these are Muslim practices. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing was what Swami Vivekananda encouraged, and that is, no matter how we self-identify ourselves, we are all human beings and we all have a mind. And as far as the basic contours of the mind are concerned, just as we all share human characteristics, so the mind also, there are common characteristics of the mind that we share. So is it possible to distinguish the different religious practices across religious traditions by seeing which functions of the mind that they predominantly employ in their practice? And that is how the different yogas come into being. Now, it's one way to think of yoga as particularly a very Hindu or a very Vedantic practice. But yoga can be seen in the way Swami Vivekananda defined it, that it's primarily a spiritual practice. The mortal creature trying to break through that barrier of mortality and find immortality. The human trying to reach out to the divine, using the only instruments we have, the body and mind. And so, looking upon yoga as that kind of a reaching out to the divine, using the mind that we have. And then, the 4 yogas that we have, so the religious practices that predominantly employ the reasoning faculty, all of those practices can be grouped together under one head. And in Sanskrit, they just call it Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. Similarly, all the spiritual practices which predominantly employ the affective function, that is the function of the feelings and emotions within us. If those are predominantly employed in a religious practice, then that becomes the yoga of devotion, yoga of bhakti. Now, the third function of the mind is the willpower. So there are spiritual practices which, while they use the entire mind, they predominantly employ the power of the will. Now, when that willpower is employed in the external world, then that becomes the yoga of selfless service, karma yoga, because we have most of our lives are spent dealing with the world outside. So if we can deal with the world outside, the people, the objects, everything that we deal with, do it intelligently, then that itself can become a spiritual practice. And similarly, employing the power of the will within to look at what's going on inside me and to bring that harmony within me, that is another yoga called Raja Yoga. So sooner or later, many of us might come to the conclusion that all religions are only so many labels. They play an important role in our lives, but it's good to not remain confined to any single label forever. At some point, our consciousness must rise beyond what each of us sees as my religion. There is a religion with a capital R that transcends all religions with a small r. Being a citizen of one country is good and helpful, but at some level we must realize also that we are simultaneously citizens of the world. The same is true in the field of religion as well. I sometimes like to think of a religious world as an international multilingual school. Now where, let's say in this international multilingual school, all the courses are taught in many different languages. So the same course is taught in a bunch of languages because it has to cater to people from all over the world. Now consider this. If you walk inside a class that is being taught in a language that you don't understand, then all you hear is just sound, which means nothing to you. But if you look at the students taking that class, you will see on their faces that what is being taught is making perfect sense to them. It is meaningful to them because they understand the language in which it is being taught. It is bringing them joy, it is bringing them fulfillment, just as your own class, taught in the language that you understand, brings you meaning and fulfillment as well. What is more, those students in the other class are learning exactly the same thing that you are learning, just in a different language. Now, just because I don't understand that language does not mean that those students are doing something meaningless or doing something pointless or just doing something superstitious. Now, just as we are able to see education as a process of learning, no matter in what language that learning occurs, or under what teacher that learning occurs, or what instruments are used in the process of that learning, because the process of education is the same. In the same way, it is possible to see that many religions are just different versions, different manifestations of this one religion. It's as religion understood in the sense of the process about learning about life or learning about ourselves, the process of learning about the meaning and purpose of existence. Swami Vivekananda once said, the whole world of religions is only a traveling, a coming up of different men and women through various conditions and circumstances to the same goal. Every religion is only evolving a God out of the material human being, and the same God is the inspirer of all of them. Why then are there so many contradictions? They are only apparent. The contradictions come from the same truth adapting itself to the varying circumstances of different natures. So the truth is the same, but religion, which is the process of learning, the process of exploring, that is also one, but its manifestations are many. There's one quote often attributed to George Bernard Shaw that there's only one religion, but many versions of it. To quote Swami Vivekananda once again, that one eternal religion is applied to different planes of existence, is applied to the opinions of various minds and various races. There never was my religion or yours, my national religion or your national religion. There never existed many religions. There is only the one. One infinite religion existed all through eternity and will ever exist. And this religion is expressing itself in various countries in various ways. So the goal is to dive deeper within our own heart, to go beyond the details. The details are important because that's what makes us grow, makes us go closer to ourselves. But when we acquire that clarity of mind, that depth of perception, we will be able to see that beyond all the diversity is this wonderful wonderful harmony. That the again, the analogy that often gets described not only in in uh, in the teachings of great one, but also through songs and through music, is this analogy of an ocean, how the water on the surface is restless. There is waves, there are ripples, there is all kinds of stuff happening. But as we dive deeper and deeper and deeper, we just see that it's all still. If you go to the bottom of the Atlantic or the Pacific, you'll just find everything is completely still. And all the trouble is only on the top. Same thing with the mind. The more we are able to dive deep inside our own minds, all these contradictions and unresolved conflicts that we find on the surface, everything gets very miraculously resolved inside. Not often in a very rational way, but all the ones whom today we see as enlightened, or again, the word enlightened, as I said, can be understood in many ways, but whichever way we see and adore these extraordinary beings at different parts of the world, at different points in history, that they had touched some deeper core within their heart. And it is that touching of that deeper core that helped them go beyond all these contradictions that we encounter in our daily life. So if we keep these ideas in mind, then the presence of different religions will not be a source of worry or fear or confusion. In and through every prayer, every form of worship, every scripture, we will see the multifarious, multilingual, multicultural efforts to transcend human limitations and attain to everlasting fulfillment, freedom, and bliss. So these are some of the ideas we can reflect over, and in addition to more ideas and thoughts that might come as a result of experiences that we have all had in our life, dealing with diversity, dealing with multiplicity in very different ways, and see whether as we digest all these experiences and ideas, a beautiful picture develops in our mind. And when all, it's almost like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. So when all these pieces are fit into perfectly, a beautiful picture appears. And then everything seems to make sense. But as long as it's a jigsaw puzzle, we have not yet able to figure out where each piece goes. Till that time, we will have questions, we will have doubts. But the good news is, one day that picture will be complete. So long, it won't just happen by itself. It's like someone gives you a gift of a jigsaw puzzle, and you just kind of leave it there and say, oh, one day the picture will be complete. Now, it won't be complete that way. I'll have to spend time with it, try to see which piece fits where. Sometimes I may put one piece in a wrong place and so on. But if I don't give up, one day I'll be able to put all those pieces in the right place and a beautiful picture will come. Our lives are like that. At present, it might seem as if our lives are kind of broken up into many different pieces. And it's a cause of stress, anxiety, worry, questions, doubts, all sorts of things. Now, all that we need to do is recognize the different pieces of our lives and work at putting them together. And believe me, they all will, every piece has some place in that larger picture of my life. And if I'm able to finish that picture, my job is done. So all these great ones that we today worship and adore, call them as prophets, incarnations, saints, enlightened, whatever name you want to call them by, they were the ones who had completed their puzzle. They fit the picture perfectly, and they had given us tips and teachings about how we can go about putting all these pieces together. It's then that diversity is something that can truly be celebrated. And people often speak about, oh, let's celebrate the diversity. But that celebration is not so wholehearted, partly because the that diversity also has this uncertainty, doubts, questions below it. So there is celebration, but these unresolved doubts about it. But when these doubts go away, when these questions are resolved, when this picture is perfect, then we will have a truly great celebration. We can celebrate the diversity and we can recognize the unity that underlies all these things. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Next Sunday, we will have Antar Yoga, as we do every month. We'll have readings from spiritual texts, we'll have music, we'll have prayer, and then we'll have a soup for everybody, and then we'll celebrate the birthday of all those born in the month of September. So all of you are welcome for Antar Yoga next Sunday. On Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Kathopanishad at 7:30. And on Tuesday and Saturday, the Arati and meditation will also continue as usual at 6 o'clock. Let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.